All right. Wednesday night, we're back again for the AMA. We do these every Monday and Wednesday night. I'll be traveling next week. I'll be in Florida, but we will make sure to be here for you guys like we always are. But we'll be doing it on the road. So we won't be at the house next week. Be out there. I've got a family office alternatives conference that I'll be speaking at. And then earlier in the week, doing something with a gentleman from Shark Tank. So you guys will get to see um, what we put together, which will be cool. This person didn't invent the infomercial, but really popularized the infomercial, the person I will be shooting some content with. So excited about that one. Be on the road and then back home. It's getting chilly here in Texas. I don't know about you guys. I don't know where you're at globally. We have a lot of people tune in all over the world, but we are getting ready for another snowstorm here in the south. Unusual. Well, it's not unusual. We're normally good for 2 or 3 of these per year, where we get down below freezing, kills off the bugs. It's always great. But the infrastructure here in Texas is not suited for snow or for really cold weather. I remember when I shot the scene for the original XRP Unleashed deal with Fruition. They flew in on the coldest day of the year here in Dallas back in 2024, and we shot that. It was 10 degrees here in Dallas, and no rain, no snow, but everything still shut down just because it was 10 degrees. So I don't know, if you want to call people in Texas pansies or what, but we are not built for the cold weather. I applaud you people up north, or the people that live up north. Definitely, you guys have thicker skin than me. Thank you, my wonderful wife with the tea. Thank you. So hopefully, if you are in the South and you are, getting ready, hopefully you went to the store and got your milk and your eggs and your bread today, and probably some toilet paper if you were low. Everybody's making the joke that it's going to be, back to the way it was in 20 and 21 when we had the toilet paper shortage here in the U.S., which was wild. This person says negative 25 up there in Michigan, negative 45 in the Upper Peninsula. Holy cow! Yeah, you guys are built different. I would take 100 plus over 40 degrees any day of the week. But again, I've lived here in Texas my whole life, so I'm conditioned for that. The cold weather, as other people tell me, you can just keep putting more clothes on, but that's not really my game. I'd rather strip down versus going the other way. We got a lot of people jumping in here, asking good questions. I do have one super chat I got to grab. Again, if I missed your super chat, you're always welcome to send it to us, and we will read it here. Most of the time, we just get it on the other social media channels. If you just want to DM us, Facebook, hopefully, will come back here soon. We have YouTube, X, and over here on TikTok. We'll figure out Instagram and Facebook after our accounts are reinstated. Somebody said that I am the impersonator. I don't know how that happens. I am the real person, and somehow I became the impersonator. So, talking with Meta about their community laws or the rules that they have over there, and hopefully they'll be able to get that rectified. Our attorneys have reached out. So, without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into the chat here. A lot of things happen over there on the geopolitical front, which I'm sure you guys will ask about. We'll talk about Davos. We'll talk about all the things that you can do to protect yourself and make sure that you're prepared for the coming price movement in XRP. Before we get into it, I'll touch on what Larry Fink said at Davos. I was actually just listening to this. So, old BlackRock is talking about tokenization of financial products at scale, and how both Brazil and India are very progressive in their CBDC or their digital currency rollout. He's thinking, that we're likely going to see the tokenization of financial markets much sooner than later. And the way that he discussed it, he mentioned that it should be just on one network or one chain where things are tokenized. That's going to be difficult to do if you wanted a high level of throughput and TPS, or transactions per second, and you also wanted smart contract capability. Ethereum is, slow and expensive, but has great smart contract capability. Um, Proof of stake, there's a couple different consensus mechanisms. Bitcoin is proof of work, which is very energy intensive. On the stage there with Brad Garlinghouse, he was talking about the different consensus mechanisms, and then Brian Armstrong, chimed in that proof of stake is 99% more energy efficient than proof of work, which is actually the case. We know that Ethereum migrated from proof of work over to proof of stake a few years ago, and they were talking about how that would increase throughput and reduce fees, and it didn't. So, as things sit today, really the only thing it could handle even close to the transactional volume at the back end of the stock market or these markets would be the XRP ledger that has clarity, in my opinion. Again, this is my opinion, but both, Bitcoin and ETH have been designated commodities for a while. And with Bitnomial giving the blessing by the CFTC and Caroline, when she was still there before she went to MoonPay, XRP got the listing there also. So with all that being said, I think XRP is a commodity here in the US. I mean, it's listed on Bitnomial as such. And until we get the Clarity Act, it's really going to be the only option they have in order to be able to tokenize these markets. We did get permission domains across the line today over there on the amendments. We're now in the 2-week holding period before that's implemented on the mainnet. Still have permission dexes, batch, and some other amendments hanging out there waiting to get passed. But permission domains was a big deal for institutional adoption of the mainnet on the XRPL. There are private instances, side chains, and Corda and other people that have private permissioned ecosystems that can settle using XRP on the back end. Batch payments is the other piece there that is pending on the XRPL. I think that will help the throughput and it to scale as far as payments go. But, I really do think it's probably going to take Bob Way coming in with his subnet that he has patented for the XRPL for it to actually reach, the high levels of TPS that are going to be required for MasterCard and Visa and some of these other back-end settlement systems between institutions. Otherwise, 1,500 TPS, which is what they've pushed the ledger up to in the past, it just isn't going to cut it. And it really didn't stay there very long. It's, you could scale, you could try to scale using side chains and settling back to the mainnet. I do think that they'll do that. I think they'll use payment chattels. And I think that they'll also have to use, again, the subnet. And that came from Matt Hamilton. Him and I had a discussion, probably about a year ago. And I asked him, when he wasn't being a dick over there on Twitter, about how that could happen. Because he is very intelligent. Like, he is extremely intelligent when it comes to the XRPL. He's advocated for a long time that ISO wouldn't do anything. ISO came and went, didn't do anything. But that's because it's the companies that have developed messaging systems that work with these blockchain and distributed ledger technologies and protocols, not themselves that are ISO compliant. Both Stellar and Ripple have developed that stuff. So anyway, he said, when I asked him how it would be possible for it to scale to that level of TPS, 30,000 plus, he said that it would require a subnet, either implicit or explicit, on top of the XRPL for it to reach those that level of throughput. So I think that's what we're on the precipice of here. Big things happening this year in 2026 as far as tokenization goes. People probably will ask me about the Clarity Act, but I'll go ahead and touch on that. I did say 2026. I did think it would get passed. It's not looking likely that it's going to get passed here in January. The days are dwindling down until they're going to be focused on the funding bill for the government. And they really have, really this week, if they don't get a markup to, be voted on this week, which doesn't look like the case. It looks like it's going to get pushed next Tuesday. I don't think that they're going to get it passed. They're going to have to focus on the government funding bill. It's likely that the government could get shut down again. If they did, get pushed out 30 or 40 days in a government shutdown before they came to a consensus on how to fund the government. We're looking at March, highly likely, before Congress even comes back into session. At that point, they're going to be focused on midterms. And if we get a change in, control of the House and Senate, it's Dems that are in opposition to the way the Clarity Act, and a lot of the people that are DeFi focused want it written, including Coinbase. It could, this could derail the whole thing. We may not get clarity here in 2026, which would be very upsetting, and I think set the industry back immensely. But it would also, open the door for XRP. Like I've said, it really kind of has a moat until clarity is passed. So I do think it could be adopted before then, and I think that that's highly likely. You could tokenize stocks on the XRPL very easily with the multi-purpose token, which, there's a fix being pushed for that right now. That allows for different rights for a same token that has value, that is fungible with other tokens. So let's say you had preferred shares or common shares, you could have different voting rights or ROFR provisions or co-sellers rights or other things for private equity on the XRPL. And then also, all shares on the stock market are common shares, but you could, have those rights alongside that multi-purpose token. So the XRPL is extremely well positioned to take full advantage of the tokenization of global markets. And without the Clarity Act passed here in the US, I do think it is the predominant leader in that area, and likely the one that will be adopted when there is a catalyst, which I still think is going to be oil spiking. So without further ado, we got a lot of people over here. Again, appreciate you guys taking time out of your evening, come hang out with me, and we'll jump into the questions. We got CJC Castro. He says, hey, Jake, do you think the IMF will use the SDR to fix liquidity issues during the reverse carry trade as a last attempt, as Rickards believes? Thanks and God bless. Jim's a smart guy. He's actually where I got the oil theory from for the Bank of Japan to be forced to have to raise interest rates. He's the one that talked about the Strait of Hormuz or the Strait of Gibraltar being shut down as a choke point. So, if Jim Rickards is talking about the SDR in the liquidity crisis, the SDR, for those that don't know, is a special drawing right. It is very similar to the Bancor coin that the IMF and other nations put forth at Bretton Woods in 1944, when the US dollar became the global reserve currency. And we backed it with gold. And then over time, obviously, 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard, closed the gold window, which never reopened. And then we've had floating exchange rates ever since. The SDR is a basket of currencies. It's weighted based on GDP of nations. And they would dole out whatever currency was required in order to be able to shore up a financial system. As a liquidity provider or a lender of last resort, the Fed kind of sits in that position today as the global reserve currency. Still hanging on is the dollar. But in a multipolar world, I do think the special drawing right would be the solution. But you would need a way to be able to exchange value very quickly. You've got, some people think that XRP is the ESDR. I don't think that's the case. I believe that, the ESDR will still be the basket of those currencies, and XRP will be the exchange rate peg, which was an abbreviation that the IMF put out in 2014 in their paper. If you want to go look it up, you can look up exchange rate peg, IMF. And that is about the time that Ripple rebranded from Ripple's, which was their token back then, to XRP. When XRP was originally minted, it was called XNS. And when it was minted by OpenCoin back in the day, before it was gifted to Ripple, the majority of the supply. And then obviously 20% was kept for the founders, and many of those have been sold off over the years. But Brad and Chris and a few others still have pretty significant holdings worth of XRP. All right. I should probably read the super chat here, but before I do that, I will give my disclaimer. Nothing here is financial advice. It's only for entertainment and educational purposes only. Only. And You want to make sure you're talking with a financial advisor, a CPA, or an attorney before making any tax, legal, or financial decisions. I am none of those. I'm just some guy on the internet. I come on here because I enjoy it. And you guys ask great questions. But anything I say should be taken with a grain of salt. You should do your own research, make your own decisions. Your financial decisions should not be predicated on the advice I give you here. I would take into account a lot of other people aside from myself, just like I do, to come to my investment thesis and make my decisions. And again, consult with a financial advisor. If you need those advisors, you can always reach out to Digital Ascension Group. I am the principal and CEO, and we employ a lot of people that have those certifications in order to be able to provide you that advice. And then in addition to that, though I am the owner, my opinions are my opinions. They are not the opinion of Digital Ascension Group or Digital Wealth Partners, which is our SEC registered RIA, where you can go and get financial advice. All right. We'll jump into the question. This says, from the tea lady, super chat from last live. Again, my wife handles a lot of the social media. If you do send a super chat, she's likely going to be the one that receives it and will put it here for me to answer for you. They say $10 super chat. Thank you, by the way. My wife and I love the info. Danny from Luna's Pizza in OC, California. Shout out to Danny. Appreciate you. He says, sup, Jake? What are your thoughts on Trump's post on X saying XRP would be in a U.S. reserve? And poof, haven't heard a word since. What's the inside scoop? Cheers from OC. Come and get a world-class pizza on me. Awesome, dude. Next time I'm in California, I'll probably hit you up on that. That's awesome. So Cardano and a few others actually saw a pretty good rally off of that news. Solana, Cardano, and XRP, I think, are the ones he named, and maybe Ethereum. And it didn't list Bitcoin, and Bitcoin people were up in a roar about that. David Sachs, talked about them not having audited the government when he originally got in, and they said that they would eventually audit the government's crypto holdings. I have not seen anything to date on that, but that doesn't mean that they don't hold large amounts of XRP and other digital assets already. We know that they confiscated the Bitcoin that they put in the reserve for that. Some people speculate that that's already been sold off at the top. We'll see, what actually comes about when they do audit the government's crypto holdings and, where they're holding those. I don't know. I would assume with an institutional custodian like our partner for Digital Wealth Partners, which is Anchorage. So if you want, institutional custody for your crypto, just like BlackRock, you can work with Digital Wealth Partners and get access to that. But as far as the U.S. Reserve goes, I do think that there's likely a large allocation to XRP. It may be an options contract that they negotiated with Ripple early on. Greg Kidd was like the 4th or 5th employee at Ripple, and he's who got them with the Fed in 2014. So I know that they talked to them. I know that the U.S. government's been very aware of XRP for an extended period of time. Eric Trump has talked about XRP a couple different times when he's been asked about it. I got to talk to him a little bit at SALT last year, which was cool. And we will be at SALT again this year. A lot of conferences on the circuit this year. We're going to be at ETH Denver, Bitcoin Las Vegas, XRP Las Vegas, SALT in both Jackson Hole and in Puerto Rico, likely Token 2049 in Singapore and Dubai. We're going to be traveling all over. So we'll be doing events aside from that. We got an XRP event they're going to be hosting at ETH Denver. If you guys want to, shout out to Ray Fuentes for putting that on. We'll be out there supporting him. Excited about that one. And we'll continue to put on, events for the community and the mastermind. So if you want to check that out, we do more in real life events than anybody else in crypto, except for maybe Crypto Mondays. I think, they have a bunch of different chapters and they do a good job. But yeah, shout out to Ray Fuentes for everything that he does for the XRP community. Also want to give a special shout out to Living Legacy. I won't say his name on here, but he's been a moderator for us in the Discord and the mastermind for years. He's an OG and he goes above and beyond all the time to help people. And happy birthday, Mike. Thank you for all that you do. You are a blessing to myself and everybody else in the community. We would not be where we are today without you. So thank you so much. Trying to see if I got any other super chats here. It looks like that's the only one we've got up for tonight. So we'll jump into the ones that you guys have sent. Papa, my man, he says, Jake, blessings, my friend. What can I say? I love dominoes, the pizza or the game. I'm not sure. He says, let's assume all the dominoes have already fallen. What are the next 5 dominoes? So I'm assuming you're talking about the domino theory. If you guys haven't checked out the domino theory, I would encourage you to go watch the 3 different videos that I've made on that. The 4th one will be coming out soon. Getting that edited. We'll have that up on YouTube probably this week. If you guys want to check that out at a high level, just so people are aware what the dominoes are. Spike in oil, U.S. Treasuries sell off because the reverse carry trade unwinds. We get a launch of stable coins here in the U.S. To be able to soak up those treasuries and stabilize the bond market. Chaos across markets, big fall in gold, big fall in Bitcoin. That's going to destabilize Tether. Exchanges are now illiquid. You've got ETFs, for XRP driving the supply down to the point where there's very little left on exchanges. And BlackRock, I think, will launch their ETF. Both Brad and Larry, when asked on public television about XRP, they say they can't talk about, the counterparty or what they're doing with them. Specifically asked about, an ETF product, and neither one of them, but both of them said, I can't talk about that. So we know they have NDAs in place. And that's likely a scenario that will play out. And I think will drive significant demand for XRP on the exchanges because the OTC desk and the dark pools will be dry. And we will see a spike in XRP while everything else is burning, because there will also be huge demand from the exchanges at that point to settle the trades on there. If you want to look up the Shane Ellis theory, it talks about XRP getting to $589. That's where that comes from, along with some of the other lore in the space. And, all of that demand all at one time, I do think could easily push the price to 3 or 4 digits. All those things are still in play. So on the other side of that, though, I do think that markets will rebound. I think that the singularity will probably happen in the not too distant future. You will see huge amounts of deflation across the economy. They will be able to print money in opposition to that to hold price stability. With stable coins in place, they'll have purview across the economy to be able to allocate stuff appropriately. Elon's talked about universal high income. It's not just UBI, it's universal high income for those that are making less than $150,000 a year. And they're going to have to do that, especially with the amount of jobs are going to be displaced by the implementation of these technologies and humanoid robots and all that stuff. Again, I know how sci-fi this sounds, but it will happen very quickly. They will roll all this stuff out and the economy will change. But I think it'll go up and to the right. I think that it'll be volatile in the short term. And then over the long term, we'll continue to expand GDP. There'll be a lot of technological innovation. And the stock market will likely rebound and do even better. I did talk about this in the mastermind the other day. And again, can't give you financial advice. But for me personally, when I'm looking at the stock market, we're at multiples that we haven't seen ever, 24, 25 on PE ratios, significantly overvalued. So if you are a value investor, if you invest like Warren Buffett or Ben Graham, would highly recommend having a conversation with your financial advisor. Obviously you have tax implications depending on what type of financial product you've invested through. If it's in your retirement account, you're better off. You'll be able to rotate stuff and not have to deal with the tax hit. But if it's in your personal name or your investment account, de-risking is going to come with tax implications. But you have the whole year to figure out how you're going to deal with those. So all that being said, might look at de-risking if you've made a bunch of profits in the stock market. Again, nobody can time anything. It could go higher from here. I'm just one guy on the internet. So do your own research, talk with your own financial advisor. But he asked for the next 5 dominoes. Really, it's going to be focused on progressive tech after all of this works out and geopolitical events. I think this is going to sound crazy, but if you put your tinfoil hat on for a second with me, there was some news the other day about aliens. I don't believe all that stuff, but if you wanted an event to galvanize society, that is one heck of a way to do it. people would be people, and we would unite and then be part of an intergalactic, federation or whatever. Greg Kidd talks about XRP being an intergalactic currency. We had somebody on the live Monday ask me about, payments in space using XRP. You can actually for sure do that. So if you have an internet connection, you can send a payment, and XRP also operates without an internet connection and can reconcile back to the ledger once you're back online. So yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna, again, listen to people smarter than me, go out and research, look for things. And we will be, talking about geopolitical events, what markets look like, what crypto is going to look like, post adoption, which assets we're going to be participating in and advocating for, and working in which ecosystems. We do have an event with Canary Capital, who's launched multiple ETFs across, multiple different digital assets over the last 12 months. With them, there's an event in Nashville on St. Paddy's Day this year for the mastermind members, and I believe that's already sold out. So excited for that one. And then we have our huge event at the end of the year, the Digital Fusion Summit, which is going to be on the first couple days of November. Those in the mastermind will get exclusive access to that early stage, early passes. So again, if you want to join the mastermind, see what it's all about, we'd love to have you. It is beyondbroke.com. And we got 10 days left here before social memberships are no longer sold. Anybody joining the mastermind after this month will have to do carbon 1 or higher. Honest Aim, thank you for the flowers and the gift, sir. I appreciate you. He says, Jake, Mr. Legacy, hi to the tea lady. Thanks for the leadership and creativity. The entire Beyond Broke mastermind will always be in your debt. I don't know about that. I feel like it's been a very fair trade. So thank you. He says, I agree with Brian Armstrong with the banks will win if a bad bill is passed. Fixing it is a myth. I would tend to agree with you. I do think that there needs to be oversight on DeFi. And again, these are stigmas and biases that I have because of the industry that we operate in. And it provides us a strategic advantage as a registered investment advisor, where we could provide oversight in ecosystems, we can participate, and make sure things are done in the right way. So it's selfish, what I'm saying here. So just take it with a grain of salt. I have my opinions. There's going to be a lot of people out there that are very open source, decentralized, DeFi, libertarian. I'm middle of the road. I definitely want those things. I think people should have their privacy. I think that you should be able to transact anonymously if you want to. But I do think that there still should be oversight and there should be rules around participation in certain things. I would hope that the SEC revises the accredited investor requirements here in the US, similar to what's in the UK. The UK has a really good framework for sophisticated investors, where if you participate in an industry for a couple years or have done enough research, there's 5 different ways you can become sophisticated, and only one of those is through income or net worth. So, I'm hopeful that the SEC revises some of their stuff, and that would allow a lot more democratization and access to, liquidity pools and DeFi with oversight. I don't like that it would be restricted to people with, high income or high net worth. I think it really truncates opportunity for the little guy to be able to make a bunch of money. And that's why I think there's such an affinity for crypto and why so many people have participated. This is an opportunity for the little guy to be able to make a bunch of money in a very short period of time and see the upside, take the asymmetric bets, and play at a much higher level. And again, hopefully you're doing the education. I think a lot of people are going to be at that much higher level sooner than later with the price appreciation on XRP and these other utility-driven assets. So hopefully you're doing the personal work to be able to handle that when you do come into it. Adam, he says, howdy, Jake, social mastermind member. Awesome. Glad to have you in the group. He says, will I be able to upgrade to Carbon 1 after price appreciation for $100 a month? Just wondering, since I'm already in. Yes. Anybody that is in before price appreciation, all of your pricing will stay the same. We're not moving it. Loyalty is a big deal for us. It is one of my core principles and core values. And we always take care of people that take care of us. So you will be grandfathered in at the prices. Anybody new post price appreciation will pay much, much higher prices to participate in the mastermind. But for anybody that's been there, irrespective of what level you're at, you are locked in at the prices that there are today. Sir Yuri says, you had said you expect 50% haircut for gold and silver, but for that kind of correction, we would have to see people's faith in US dollar return. Can you explain? Absolutely. So one, they're going to buy the treasuries back. There's going to be huge amounts of demand for treasuries because of the stable coin. And second to that, we've already heard Judy Sheldon talk about the 50-year gold-backed bond this year that they're going to be rolling out on July 4th. They talked about, Rosie Rios was in New York for the ball drop and talked about the lights. There was 589 lights in the 2026 fixture that they had there in New York, and that would be used again on July 4th this year when they announced that. So we're only, 7 months away from that, 6 months away from that here, which is not that far. And they will back, the treasuries with gold that'll be redeemable in 50 years. And I think that will reinstill confidence. We have way more than enough gold, I can tell you that, here in the US to be able to back the currency. And they have oil and they have XRP, which I think will be the three assets that people use to back their currency. I think that they'll all move to a tier 1 status, and gold and oil will be pegged at a certain ratio, and that'll be the peg that holds everything else together. I do think that, there'll be a level playing field. Not sure about FX markets. It's going to be interesting to see exchange rates on currencies and how that fluctuates on this new system. I think each country will back their currency with whatever they have. Canada doesn't have any gold unless they, do like out of the ground. They're able to tokenize what they have in the ground, which is possible. And imagine that, like, how much more GDP and value would there be if all of that value was extracted out of the ground and brought forth for them to be able to use it to back their currency with? That increases total global GDP significantly. That value currently sits dormant and illiquid, and that would make it liquid. So I do think that it'll be fine. I think that they'll restore faith in currencies. I do think we're in for some volatility between now and then. But to your point here, gold and silver, I do think we'll see massive drops. I think gold first. I think silver could continue to run. Again, $100, 10% either direction is what I've said, is what I think the top will be. We're already in the bottom side of that 10%. We're at, where are we at on silver today? I think we got up to $95 today. Silver price. 92, actually pulled back a little bit on the 24-hour. We were all the way up at 95.18 for the high on silver. So if you're still stacking that silver, I know many people have started to de-risk and sell off some of their silver positions, taking advantage of the rise and then reallocating to other positions. Again, not advocating for that or telling anyone to do it. These are just people that I know that are making that decision. So could it go much higher? Absolutely. I would love to be wrong with my call at $100, but I do think that's likely pretty close to the top. Dr. Dennis, my man, he says, Jake Fink is talking up tokenization in Davos in 2026. What 3 tokenization flows will drive net new XRP settlement demand? What's your USD per month estimated for each? And what evidence will you have to prove they've begun? That's a good question. Well put together. So back-end settlement of the stock market, commodities, and FX, I think will be the 3 payment flows that will likely be tokenized here in 2026. We'll talk about tokenization of their stock market. Maybe they're, different networks or protocols. A lot of people speculate it's going to be Canton. I don't know. Again, Canton doesn't have clarity. It's newer. 2023 is when they, started looking at that. 2022 is when Project Ion was finalized with the DTCC and R3. Again, that uses XRP to settle, in my opinion. Again, these are my opinions. You should do your own research on stuff. But I think it's those three. And so for each one of those, I mean, those are all between 6 and 7 trillion dollars a day in settlement volume. The total stock market value globally is around, it's more than that now, probably 650, 700 trillion dollars. FX, again, their payment flows 5, 6, 7 trillion a day. And commodities is similar. So, I mean, you're looking at somewhere between 18 and call it $21 trillion a day that would be moving over the XRPL for back-end settlement of those markets. And the evidence will be when the price stability holds. So once there is a supply shock on XRP and the price is 3 or 4 digits, it won't retrace like a lot of people are expecting it to because of the volume and the demand from these back-end settlements of these markets will hold XRP at a high, stable value. So that's, again, just a guy on the internet. That's my thesis. But I think a lot of people smarter than me would probably align with that. Rick Johnson, my man, he says, Big Jake stood. What's up, dude? 1, concern accredited institutional investors might be the only ones being able to hold or gain interest via crypto after the Clarity Act passes. 2, besides oil spike, what else can trigger the reverse carry trade? What would you say? So I'll tackle number 1 first. And I think I did just a little bit earlier, right? I'm hopeful that the SEC will propose new regulation that allows people to become accredited or sophisticated through separate means outside of just their income or their net worth. And then I'm okay with it, right? Like if you've done enough diligence and understand an industry or have worked in it for a couple years, you probably have the ability to understand the risks associated with making that investment. Should they cap you at 10% of your total income invested in private investments each year if you are in a certain class or underneath a certain income? They don't cap you at the casino. They don't cap you on lottery tickets. So I think people should be able to do what they want with their money. If you want to live on ramen and scrape by and dump everything you can into investments in order to be able to live a better life for a period of time, I think people should be able to do that. And I think a lot of people have for crypto over the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years. They understand where this asset class is going and the opportunity that exists, and it's not going to be around much longer. So that's my position there. I would like, more access to these markets and asymmetric bets for people. But again, still oversight and some type of regulation around it. Separate of that, besides oil spike, what else could trigger the reverse carry trade? Bank of Japan is going to have to raise interest rates aggressively, somewhere between 75 and 100 basis points at one time. That's really the only way that this is going to go down. They've said that they're going to hold tomorrow. So if that ends up being the case, we're not going to see it unwind because, again, these central banks don't want to be the ones that cause this. They want to have a scapegoat. They want to have an out. They want to have, oh, well, that happened, so we had to do this, right? Problem, reaction, solution type situation. Because then they can't be blamed. And we know it's their fault, but, they can pawn it off on something else. So oil, it would have to be something else that would cause significant inflation in Japan's economy. Oil and energy would absolutely do that. If you could think of something else that would cause large amounts of inflation in their economy in a very short period of time that they would have to react to, I'd be open to that too. But I'm, hate to use 99.9999 again, but I'm very confident that it will be oil that pushes them over the edge. All right. We need bank adoption. Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Permission domains is going to be a big deal for the mainnet of the XRPL to be adopted because you're going to be able to tie your digital identity and your credentials to that domain, permission domain, and then you're going to be able to participate in specific ecosystems and unlock those access to that because of your credentials or your ID in order to be able to participate. That's what institutions want, and that is why Ripple proposed it, and that's why it's going to get passed. And again, Ripple only has 3 of the validators over there on the XRPL. The other validators also have to pass it for it to make it through. We got Easty. They say legendary Jake. Thank you for the super chat. They say, thanks to you and the tea lady and your team. What me worry about? Texit coin. Oh boy. Also, any success stories for 506c getting an exchange account somewhere? We can do 506cs or 501c nonprofits or public charities. We can manage those assets there at Anchorage. We have the capability to do that. We're actually looking at a pretty big deal that I got wind of today. So we'll see. Hate to announce anything before it's an actuality. I talk about some of that stuff in the mastermind a little bit early, but for the most part, try to keep it on the DL till it's a done deal. So we can. As far as other exchanges, I've seen trust accounts, I've seen LLCs, I've seen LTDs, I've seen companies in other jurisdictions, I've seen C corps, I've seen S corps. But as far as nonprofits, I'd have to ask these other ones. I know we can do it, like I said, but it's not something that we've had a tremendous demand for outside of Digital Wealth Partners and Anchorage. Texit coin. I'm just going to stay away from it. I appreciate the question. Again, if I don't have anything nice to say, I stay away from things. And if and I could be ignorant too. I hope people make a bunch of money in it, and I'm way off base. There's some other projects like that for me, and when they're brought up, I tend to just pivot and stay away from angering people. Duck Sauce 101. Wow. The man, the myth, the legend. When your XRP premonition, nice, I can read tonight, comes full circle and Hollywood comes calling with the Big Short crypto edition, can I be part of the movie? I know you're a man of your word. Just shooting my shot. God bless. If you want to be an extra, dude, I'm game for it. I don't think I'm going to be in the movie. Hopefully they pick somebody cool to play me. A lot of people say I look like Jack Reacher or Taylor Lautner, like from the nose down. I remember when Twilight came out, and obviously my name's Jacob. And so, my wife says Blake Griffin. I get that one all the time too. I'd take any of those. Any of those guys could play me. I think they're all fairly good-looking gentlemen, and I would be okay with any of those. And again, I don't really care to be well-known or famous. I come on here and share this information with you guys because I think it's important, and I try to break it down and make it simple so that it's digestible and you guys can understand what's going on geopolitically and globally. So again, I am the right amount of famous, which is a weird thing to say because I don't think I'm anything special. But like, I go out in public, nobody knows who I am unless they have a bunch of XRP, and they're like, "You're that XRP guy." I'm like, "Heck yeah!" And it's cool. I like people come up to me and like we immediately have a connection, and it's a really cool thing to be a part of. Never would have imagined it in my whole life. Very weird to be in a position where I can provide value, and so many people know who have seen me before, and they'll come up. And I was the other way on that. Many of these YouTubers and other influencers I watched for a long time before I ever started making content on this stuff, and really was on their channel or anything else. And it was kind of like starstruck, like you feel like this other person because you watch their content all the time. And you walk up and you're excited and you say their name and they're like, "Hey," and I don't ever want people to feel that way. I try to be very welcoming because I've been on the other side of that interaction, and it's weird. So, but again, super cool. I appreciate everybody that watches. And again, if you see me out in public, don't hesitate. Come up, say hi. Happy to shake your hand and, talk a little bit about XRP. Work hard, play harder says, give us another prediction without giving another prediction. People fiending for that hopium. Look, I mean, if you're listening to what I'm saying, you kind of get the gist, right? Like, there's a lot of things that seem very imminent. Um, they could absolutely play out in the short term. I don't know what they're still waiting on. Ripple did get their license in the UK just recently. That may have been a blocker. They don't have a VASP in India, but they may not need to. They may just need to register there. I don't understand all of the global laws. We're working on that for compliance and stuff that we do. But I'm sure they likely will try to get a VASP there in India, and maybe that's the last thing that they need before all of this kind of unfolds. Still waiting on Satoshi's Bitcoin to move. I feel like that also is going to be a tell. When you see Satoshi's Bitcoin move, I don't know if they'll liquidate it or not, but I think that will be, a big deal for the Bitcoin community, and I have a strong feeling that that is going to take place. Retired fire chief, my dude, he says, "Thank you for your service, by the way." Actually, there was a gentleman that texted me earlier today that I need to call tomorrow. That is also a fire chief out there in California. Shout out to Kelly. Good people, and again, you guys risk your life for others. You barrel your way into situations. You put your life at risk, and thank you. It's not stated enough, and I'm sure other people probably feel the same way. They say, if the time comes when I can no longer afford to custody my assets at Anchorage, is there a withdrawal fee? No fee to take it out. And again, like, I went hunting this last weekend, talked to some guys out there. One of them's a client, another one's thinking about being a client. We want to be providing more value than we're taking. And right now, sometimes I feel like we're taking more value than we're providing, especially for people that only have, right? 50,000 XRP is a lot of XRP to most people. That's our minimum. But if you're not accredited and you can't participate in the fund, we're working so hard to get these other products across the line. I cannot tell you how excited we're going to be when that finally happens. I mean, we've been working on it for 7 months at this point with the counterparties, and they are very close to coming to fruition. So at that point, we will absolutely be able to make sure that we're covering everybody's fees there at Digital Wealth Partners and at Anchorage. And I think that'll open up a lot of people's appetite to move over there, because there's been many people that have just held off because they can hold it on a cold wallet and it's free and don't necessarily need Anchorage. Anchorage is for people that are concerned. I think, like, if your spouse doesn't really understand crypto and your kids are young, makes a lot of sense to hold your stuff there at Anchorage. I'd view it as an insurance policy. You pay for insurance, right? You pay for life insurance, probably, if you have some beneficiaries, to make sure that they're taken care of and the assets transfer and you're good. Segregated, bankruptcy remote, insured up to $100 million. You're not going to get that anywhere else. But Anchorage does charge custody fees. And so, we also charge basically custody fees through AUM there. And, we provide some additional value on top of that, or at least we try our best to. But if you, wanted to remove a portion just to keep your foot in the door, we're not going to be mad at you. I get that, right? And again, I think we're very close to having these other products and making sure that people have more than enough income coming in to cover fees plus extra on their crypto. So, yeah, I appreciate the question. And again, like, I try to put myself in the client's shoes because I am a client. And everything that I've built up to this point has been very selfish. I try to be, another one of my, core values and principles is to be selflessly selfish. So I always try to align my incentives with other people's, and they have to win for me to win. I don't like zero-sum games where one person wins and one person loses. So this person says, seriously, can you consider using your company until you were asked what a 1099 was? I got spooked. 1099 employee? Yeah, so we have W-2 employees. there at Digital Wealth Partners, which is unusual for an RIA. Most RIAs are 1099. They work as a contractor, and the administrative services and back office stuff is what the RIA does, and they tend to pay people a higher AUM. But all of those RIAs have to go out and hunt business, and they kind of operate their own business with the large RIA behind them, or the IA, which is an investment advisory firm. We do that a little bit different. We have a lot of inbound. We have a lot of people that work with us or want to work with us. And so we pay a high salary to those there at Digital Wealth Partners. And they are W-2 employees. And they also still get paid some on the AUM that they manage. We've got this person, Dad Ventures, Redeemed Adventures. Very cool. They say, hey, Jake, no price, no public prediction, just friend to friend. Would you share where you think XRP and XLM and HBAR would be in January 2027 and January 2028? I mean, I've said publicly before that I think, toward the end of 2026 and into 2027, we could absolutely see a $10,000 XRP. And I think, at that point, we would likely have clarity passed, significant adoption, stable coins or tokenized deposits, adopted widely by institutions, merchant services, peer-to-peer payment providers, different platforms, Meta, all the social media networks likely have payment processing services. You might have a cash address, kind of like an email address that you're able to send payments from on those different rails. So that would be, January 27, 4 or 5 digits. But again, that's predicated on all of these things I'm talking about have played out at that point. They've kicked the can a lot longer than I thought they could. And, there's been some other things said that I felt very strongly about, obviously. So all of that still feels close at hand. And if that does play out early here in 2026, it's a high likelihood that, early 2027, we could see 4 or 5 digits for XRP. January 2028, it would kind of be predicated again on all of this stuff playing out and what happens in 27 for adoption. But I think we'll probably have derivatives starting to come online at that point. And really, mid 5-digit XRP is what would be required in order to be able to handle that volume and settlement, especially as we see the growth in the economy. So again, I know these numbers sound sky high and they're difficult to comprehend for people in that short of a period of time. Most people are used to, like Solana went from $9 to over $200 in about 9 months. So, I mean, that's a pretty exponential move for XRP to go from where it is today at $2 to $50,000 in a 24-month period. Seems unheard of. But again, there needs to be catalysts for that to happen. There's global macroeconomic events, there's supply shocks, there's implementation of tokenization of real world assets at scale. And again, by the end of 2030, it's my prediction that 80% of the world will be on chain. Big JK 589, they say, hey Jake, if price appreciation a prerequisite for your partner on the yield product available for clients in Q2? Possible. With the amount that things have been delayed, it makes me think maybe so. But I don't know. I don't know when that's going to be. I felt very strongly that it would happen at the end of last year, and we didn't see that. And so I'm not sure what the delay is, but I feel strongly that again here in 2026, we're looking good on a lot of things. DFW Mike, my man, Mike is awesome. He puts together great events, and that's the other cool thing about the mastermind. There's some events that are put on by just people in the mastermind with local people, where you get to go and hang out and meet other cool people and have conversations and develop relationships so that you're not alone. A lot of the time people feel ostracized or kind of alone on an island when you talk about this stuff with other people. None of that happens in the mastermind. Everybody gets it. And it's cool to be able to share ideas, share dreams, and then cultivate relationships so that on the other side of price appreciation, you have cool people to go do cool stuff with. And Mike's awesome at putting together events here in DFW. So thank you, Mike, for all that you do for the community. And I appreciate, all the support. He says, evening legend of XRP. We are going to need XRP price appreciation by this weekend so I can burn cash to stay warm. Sophia says hello to the tea lady. Thank you for putting all of this together for my great grandkids. Love that. Thank you so much. Super excited to work with you and your family. I talked to my team this last week, and Pantheon thinking is another one of our core values and principles. That's looking at the next 100 years. How are we going to be around? There's businesses in Japan that have been around for hundreds of years. Very unusual here in the US for a company to have been around hundreds of years. That's the type of legacy I want to leave. That's the type of company we want to have. We want to, again, be able to help our clients for many generations and make sure that they are set up for this stuff. So thank you for being a part of that. Thank you for the support. And I'm with you. Hopefully you and your wife are staying warm. You got some firewood and some propane before, hopefully the power just stays on, but you never know how it's going to go. Chomp Master says, Jake the Snake, quick question on supply shock. How much XRP is still out there on the OTC versus exchanges and dark pools? Feels quiet lately, and I can't find a clear update. Well, that's because the one lady that put out what she believed was available on the OTC desk got berated, and she took her deal down very quickly. She said that there was about 96 million XRP left on the OTC desk, which sounds about right to me. And that was about a week ago. We haven't seen huge inflows this week. If you guys don't follow Chad Steingraber over there on Twitter, I would suggest giving him a follow, checking him out. He does a really good job of the daily updates on how much XRP was bought off the market. So I can tell you guys today, because I'm sure he posted it, closed at $29.85 million, just shy of 30 million. Keeping an eye on Grayscale's total tonight. They did not report outflows, as some are saying so far. So, on the day here, we saw about $30 million worth of XRP bought up at today's price. That's about 15 million XRP off the market. If that's coming from the OTC desk and dark pools, which it would be because price continues to maintain, sideways or down action, they're eating into it quickly. I really don't think there might be, but I think less than 100 million XRP available. So, some of them had outflows today, but as an aggregate total, they still have, inflows on the day. Bitwise XRP ETF is trading at $21.92. Not sure. Well, I mean, that makes sense that they would be at about 10 and a half XRP per share, 11 XRP per share is probably what their backing is, because there's a ratio, right? They have to back it, it's not 1-to-1, but whatever ratio amount of XRP per share is what they have. Excited to see Evernorth and what they're going to be able to put together. JLC, Salter Chuck, what's up, my man? He says, is Codius still a thing? If not, why wouldn't Ripple consider buying a layer 1 smart contract platform like Flare? Looking forward to seeing you do the domino dance. Thanks, brother. So Flare Foundation is a nonprofit. Nonprofits can't be owned by for-profits. They're also international. Not that that would stop Ripple, because they've made multiple international acquisitions in the past 12 months, Palisade being one of those for their custody solution and licenses. They did have a strategic investment in Flare. But I don't think Hugo would sell out to Ripple. Again, it being a nonprofit, I don't think you can, because the foundation, right? Now, your foundation can own for-profit companies. Just so you guys know, when you set things up later on, if you do have a nonprofit, that can own for-profit enterprises. And you can also develop a bunch of R&D at your nonprofit and then sell it to your for-profit to be able to monetize it for very cheap and get donations to develop the IP at the nonprofit, which allows people's tax write-offs. Anyway, when it comes to Codius, the only time that I've ever heard Ripple talk about Codius, and it wasn't publicly, was Brad Garlinghouse at CoinAlts in 2023. It was the first time I met him in person, shook his hand. He knew who I was, which was weird. I asked him about ODL at that conference, but prior to that, he'd gone into the Peanut Butter Manifesto, which is what he wrote when he was at Yahoo, and he had talked about when he showed up at Ripple. They were working on 3 different things all at the same time: the payment processing business, Codius for smart contracts, and digital ID, which was our global ID at the time. Global ID has since spun out. We've talked to them a couple different times. They've actually made some good introductions, but they're chain agnostic at this point. Do I use lip filler? No. These are natural. Fortunately or unfortunately, whatever you want to say. So back to the question at hand. That's the only time I've ever heard Brad publicly talk about, when it wasn't public, again, it was a private event, it was invite only, Codius. And he said that they had pivoted away from it, and he kind of chuckled that maybe they should have stayed pursuing smart contracts because of how well Ethereum did. If you go to Codius.io, I don't know if I can pull it up here. Codius.io. I am not a robot. Allow. Well, it used to come up and it said it's in beta, expect dragons. I do think that it's still around. I think that it'll likely be used. I think that it is the smart contract enabler to be able to tokenize the derivatives market. And that comes from Kendra Hill. Many of you that are new here probably have no idea who that is. She had a Steam It back in 2015 and posted a lot about XRP, said that her grandpa was a banker and had given her a book on a lot of this stuff, and also bought $10,000 worth of XRP when it was 1/100th of a penny, and told her not to touch it. She was 16 at the time, is what she touted online. But she talked about the derivatives market. She talked about ETFs. Many of the things that were in those Steam It posts have actually come to pass at this point. So it would not surprise me if Codius was for the derivatives market, which is what she stated in a lot of those posts. And it's difficult to find those. Some people have screenshots of them if you want to go check it out. And again, all of that's just kind of lore and hearsay. There are no documents to back any of that up. She could have been a Looney Tune out there on the internet. But again, a lot of the things she's talked about have come to pass over the last decade. Truest of hearts, they say. KT baby here. Awesome. Good to see you. General chat was wild. Would like to know if one XRP can be reused 100,000 times for settlement. Does high velocity cap price, or does real utility drive price? So it can be used multiple times per day. Actually, had an interesting conversation today. The other person that I was talking to was in communication with Robbie Mitchnick. Won't tell who it was. Robbie is over there at BlackRock. He's the head of their digital asset division, or he's still there. He worked at Ripple for a period of time, and while he was at Ripple, he developed a calculator that shows, how XRP could be worth $10,000 piece. And in that calculator, he limited XRP to being used up to 10 times per day. So, maybe he's crazy, maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, he did take the position as head of digital assets at BlackRock, so I'd probably give him some street cred on his ability to understand everything going on with the XRPL from his time at Ripple, which he took off of his LinkedIn page after he took the job at BlackRock. Things that make you go, So, that's what I use as my reference. Again, I am not the technical guy. I don't understand every little detail about the XRPL and its scalability and what's in the code. I know enough to be dangerous on all that stuff. So I try to listen to people that are smarter than me. I hold Robbie Mitchnick in a very high regard. And for him to have developed a calculator that shows it can be used up to 10 times a day, that's what I'm going to go with. So hopefully that answers your question and provides you some value. We are a little bit over the hour, so I'm going to go to the bottom of the chat and I'm going to work my way up. If you haven't put in a super chat, don't stop super chats at this point because I'm not going to get to it. If you do put it in there and I don't get to it, again, you can send it to us on social media, or you can go into the mastermind and post it there, and I'm sure the team there will make sure it gets back to me. We've got Marion Jordan. They say, do you think the Supreme Court delays the ruling on tariffs so that Trump could use tariffs as leverage against the EU? With that being said, is the Supreme Court ruling a catalyst for a black swan? Tariffs are definitely a leverage point that Trump has been using, and I'm kind of for it. I know there's a lot of people that think it's causing inflation or causing issues in our economy. We're going to have to go through a period of hurt. Okay. Like, in order to get things right here in the US and get manufacturing onshore, there's going to be stuff that's not fun that we have to do. Trump is in his last term here. He can do things that are not fun because he's not running for re-election. So he can do things that are unpopular that will actually set the US up for a better future. And I think tariffs are part of that. Again, I know a lot of people, may disagree with that, and that's okay. He does talk about the late 1800s where we were the, largest creditor nation. We had tariffs, we didn't have income tax, and we actually had more money than we knew what to do with at the government level at that time. We ran a surplus, which has only happened a couple times in our history here in the US. We run a huge deficit at this point with the amount of government spending that we have versus GDP and taxes. So, all that being said, I don't think they're going to take that away from him. I do think that they likely want Greenland. We bought the Virgin Islands for $25 million in the early 1900s. It's been a while since we've bought a large landmass. You might look at, the Louisiana Purchase, Alaska, and some of the other ones that the U.S. has acquired over the years. Many of those in today's value are hundreds of millions of dollars, which is actually fairly cheap for what I would think they would go for. Greenland is very strategic for being able to shoot down missiles and our, things that are coming from China and Russia. If we had a military base there and had control over that jurisdiction, it would allow us to mitigate a lot of that risk that we might have today. And then alongside that, there's also the raw minerals and resources there in Greenland. Greenland is not green. It's full of ice and snow, which is interesting. Greenland and Iceland, the Vikings actually gave them those names in order to keep people away from the place that they wanted to go, which was Iceland, which was green. And they talked about, the green one, or talked about the icy one and called it Greenland so that people would go there. And that's just stuck around. Obviously, that's the way it is today. At least that's the story I was told. That could be phooey. I don't know. So yeah, I do think that he's probably going to coerce NATO to relinquish that and likely buy that from the nation state that's there. And look, like Canada could be the 51st state. Venezuela could be the 51st state. Greenland could be the 51st state. I think, there's going to be people that are in opposition to that. Obviously, people don't like change, but I think the majority would probably benefit. The people there would probably benefit in any of those jurisdictions if they, did partner or come over to the U.S. and become part of the union. Again, that's just one man's opinion. I know that there's a lot of people out there that probably disagree with me. We got Defiant Energy. They say, Jake, is there not a way that exchanges can keep yield, but in a way that is beneficial to TradFi? Thinking out loud here, but there are a few mutual beneficial options I've thought of. So again, tokenized deposits is the solution to all of this, back and forth over stable coins. I think it's a stupid argument to delay this, is really what I think it is. I think it's on purpose. At least that's how I feel about it. I think they needed a reason to push this out, and again, continue to give Ripple and XRP a moat. You can call that conspiracy or tinfoil hat. We'll see what shakes out with that. But there's other people that say that nothing can happen till the Clarity Act is passed. Again, we'll have to see how that plays out. I'm confident that I'm right. I wouldn't come out here and say it if I wasn't. But when it comes to the banks and the exchanges, tokenized deposits at the bank can pay a yield, and they still have all the benefits of a stable coin. So you put your money in the bank, you can access it 24/7, 365, and they can pay an interest on it in order to be able to compete with the stable coins or tokenized deposits that are held at exchanges. The main deal for the banks is it's about $6 trillion that they feel like they're going to lose if they don't stop this in some way, which isn't just $6 trillion because there's fractional reserve lending at these banks. So it's $60 trillion that would no longer be available through banks to the public. And they're arguing that that's a bad thing. The leverage on that is a double-edged sword. It's good and bad, right? It provides people liquidity. You can go get a mortgage, you can get a home loan, or not a home loan, but a business loan, a car loan, credit cards, all that stuff through the banks. When you do DeFi, it's over collateralized, right? So that 6 trillion that left there in stable coins, or if it was moved into stable coins on exchanges, people would borrow against that at 90% LTV, and the interest rates would be fair or comparable. That's way less liquidity. It would be like 600,000 less, or 6 million less. Sorry, 600 billion less. So you'd have call it 5.3, 5.4 trillion dollars that would be out there instead of $60 trillion. I get that, right? That's a lot less liquidity out there if this rotation happens. So to your point, I think that they'll find a solution, and I think that will be tokenized deposits. All right, we got Brandon. He says, Lone Star Legend. Appreciate you, dude. Sticking with your nickname for you till someone topples me. It's pretty good. I will take it. I appreciate the vote of confidence in the sport. He says, you said you are a hunter, mastermind group elk hunt one day. I actually just bought a 7mm. It's a Tika rifle. I was told, some people say that's a good rifle. Some people say it's trash. I don't know. I know it shoots things, and it can kill a small elk. So I bought it because I thought, all right, well, I might want to go elk hunting. So it's funny you bring that up. I'd probably be game for that one. He says, no XRP questions. You get enough attention on those. So this one's one for the tea lady. What's her post-price appreciation charitable dream? So my wife deals with horses, and she would like an arena for her team that she's a part of to ride at. And I think that would be, and then she may do scholarships for the people that ride on her team, or put on charitable events, be able to give back to the horse community, solve, EPM and some of the other diseases that kind of ail horses today. She went to school to be a vet tech. She has extreme knowledge about everything equestrian and everything canine, like the amount of knowledge that she has on both of those topics. Like it's so bad that like when we go to a party and somebody else starts talking about those things, she has to like bite her tongue because she wants to correct people, but oftentimes she plays it cool and is very nice about stuff. But anyway, I think that would probably be what she would do. Help young riders, get into college, do some college scholarships for people that ride horses, and advocate for the sport. This one would be controversial, but I'm going to throw it out here. I probably shouldn't say that. I'm going to stay away from that because there's going to be people that don't agree with that one pretty strongly. So those would be the things I think she would probably most likely do in a charitable capacity. We've got this person. Thank you for the super chat. They say, how do you make income from crypto without selling or taking a loan against it? Staking would be about the only way that you could do it without doing either one of those things. We margin it at Digital Wealth Partners. So there's a loan against it, but it's a loan against the reflected value. So the assets stay in institutional custody and get reflected on the exchange, and that's where the margin's released. They only ever trade, 40 or 50% against that asset. And so that mitigates volatility risk. On 1010, we had no assets called away. The income fund actually made money on 1010, which was pretty cool. The largest crypto liquidation in history, 9 times larger than FTX and Celsius and Voyager. So, I'm pretty confident in our products and the way that we've structured things. I can tell you there's some other big players that are also looking at it and they're excited about it. And all the other DeFi people do it the same way we do it. It's not like we do anything different. We just do it through a regulated securities offering here in the US. And if we were on chain, we would be the largest DeFi protocol on the XRPL. $350 to $400 million worth of XRP, depending on the price, in the hedge fund today. So that's how we do it. In the future, there will be some other ways to do it. Pseudo accounts, borrow, lend, and liquidity pools on the XRPL. When those get passed, will be some unique ways that I think we'll be able to take advantage of those. The way that we've structured the hedge fund is mirrored how I think things are going to work on chain. And once we can do, DeFi in an institutional capacity and the XRPL has passed those amendments, I would love to tokenize the funds there at Digital Wealth Partners. We'd have to talk to our team about that. I don't get to make all the decisions over there. We have a president and a CEO to do a lot of that, but I could bring it and see if they would entertain it. I think that they would, there's a lot that goes into that. But all that being said, those are the ways that we generate returns and income today. But it does require, the margin against the asset. And we'll have a debt product, CD, and maybe even a bond product in the not too distant future. Jake, mastermind member, all for the H. What's going on, brother? Thank you for being part of the group. Blessed and grateful to have you there. He says, looking to get an LLC set up soon. Awesome. Thanks for all that you do and the information you provide. Do you think Epstein files are being kept hidden to hide info and keep BTC afloat for now? Yeah, I think that there is much more to come with the Epstein files. I think that they've only released a small portion of those, and there's going to be some evidence released in that documentation that is likely going to cause some issues with Bitcoin and Tether, in my opinion. We'll see if I'm right about that or not. And then separate of that, you did mention the LLC. Happy to work with you on that. If you want an LLC for your digital assets, you can go to digitalfamilyoffice.io and use the code 50OFF, 50OFFDAG LLC. That's 50OFFDAG LLC. Get you everything end to end that you're ever going to need for the first year for your holding company to manage your digital assets out of Wyoming for $2,000. You can also add a living trust, which we have a webinar about tomorrow. So if you haven't registered for that webinar, we would love to see you guys there. I think that one's in the afternoon tomorrow. And if you miss it, it'll be up on the channel. You'll be able to watch it later. We'll have it for the mastermind first, and then it'll be publicly available after that. We got Dan Plaskett there with me to talk about living trusts and why that matters for probate protection for your digital assets and your other assets, and why and how you should put that together alongside the LLC for creditor protection and the anonymity that provides you. And then also, you know, you get the full breadth of the tax code to be able to mitigate taxes for your profits or income that you create off of the crypto. So again, if those things sound cool to you and you want more information before you pull the trigger and buy one or work with us, we would love to see you at the webinar tomorrow. I think we already have like 1,500 people registered for the webinar. So super cool. And if you don't make it, you register and don't make it, it will be emailed to you so that you can watch it later. We already went over this one. This time it kicked me down in the chat. Scrolling up here, we've got another one that says, just call me newer. Okay, newer. I probably still butchered that, and I'm sorry. They say ETFs are doing great and price is not. How and until when? Hooked on hopium. Help a brother out. Again, like I've talked about, the OTC desk and dark pools are where the majority of the ETFs are buying their supply for their XRP. Like I said, I'm pretty confident that there's less than 100 million total XRP available across all of the OTC desk and dark pools. They're almost out here, and as soon as they are out and they have to move volume to the exchanges, that's when you're going to see price gap up. We've already seen that on a couple exchanges. Kraken had a $91 XRP register, and then on Upbit we saw a $100 XRP register. I think all of the exchanges are going to be seeing those type of prices when we see the volume from these ETFs have to move to the exchange and not be able to move through the OTC desk or the dark pools. So, you know, 30 million today taken away. If we have another 3 days like that, I think they're dry, which is wild to say, right? So again, it could take longer. I don't know exactly how much is on there. People are going to hold me to that, but you're asking my opinion. I'm giving you my opinion. Now, could Ripple release the escrow early next month and there be another 300 million out there? Yeah. Could they sell more than 300 million? Yeah. Could they float this along a little longer? Yeah. But all that being said, like, it's dwindling and I don't feel like we're very far off. Ryan, Mr. Williams, he says, can you speak on XDC is what I assume he's asking about, and Ripple partnership? Or actually, maybe it is DXC. I didn't see the DXC partnership. I didn't spend a whole lot of time on Twitter today. I was pretty busy with work, working, you know, somewhere between 14 and 16 hours most days. I consider this part of my work, even though I do really enjoy it. And really all my work I enjoy. But sometimes I don't get to get over there on Twitter and see what's going on as much as I would like. So all that being said, the DXC, I don't know what that is, and I wish I could speak to it. I will go out and look for the information. Well, I mean, hell, we'll take a look here. Was it announced by Ripple? We'll pull it up here. Ripple. And on CNBC, G Treasury, UDAX is the digital asset accelerator. I don't see what you mentioned, which is DXC. I would assume that if that was a real partnership or something, that Ripple would have announced it. We did get the Binance listing for RLUSD today. Pretty cool. That is on the Ethereum blockchain over there, but they soon will have it on the XRPL, on the EVM sidechain. So unfortunately, Brian, I appreciate the super chat, but I don't know the answer, and I don't want to try to make something up and, you know, be wrong. I tried to look it up, still couldn't find it. If you want to post something in the chat, I will try to scroll back down before the end and find it from you. Rockin' HL, they say, thanks for all that you do, sharing what you can. After price appreciation, I'll give your son free roping lessons. Dude, I would take you up on that. I have questions as to why they keep stalling this when it's inevitable. We are there, just waiting. I'm with you. I feel like everything's in place. All the dominoes are stood up. We're waiting on oil to spike. As soon as that happens, we are off to the races. So just hanging out, twiddling my thumbs, dollar cost averaging when I can. And on the other side of it, I think people are going to be set for a long, long time. Would love to work with you on the roping lessons. I think he would enjoy that. He can ride the barrel pattern. He's done some play days. Not the best rider in the world. Doesn't have a great seat yet, but takes time and practice, and he just doesn't do enough of that to be, at the level that some of the other kids his age are. But if he got into roping, I'm sure he would ride more, and that would make my wife happy. Noor says, we already did that one. Scroll it on up. Rockin' HL. Maybe that's the ranch brand that you got. I like that, my dude. Thoughts on Zinnick? Also, do you think Trump will let the reverse carry trade unwind? He states where he stood at the World Economic Forum. Yeah, I don't think he's gonna have a choice. There's gonna have to, and they already shored things up with the Genius Act. Like, that's why they got that across and left clarity out to dry, and they didn't do one bill. I think there's gonna be 2 more bills. I think that we're gonna get the Clarity Act, and I think there's gonna be another DeFi bill after that, because that's really the contention between the Republicans and the Democrats right now. I think if they pulled the DeFi component out of the Clarity Act and just said, like, this is the situation where this asset is a security or a commodity or a currency, that's what we really need in order for the, everything to progress here. And then DeFi can come in later with oversight from whatever division they're going to need oversight. And that might be the SEC for broker dealers. It might be the CFTC. I think it should depend on what type of assets are being traded in that ecosystem, who has oversight or visibility or auditability on those smart contracts and those protocols. This person says, what do you think about price appreciation within the next 60 days? Take a sip of your tea. I hear it's good. Cheers. I don't know if you guys have seen the R3 mug or not. My son broke it and I had to fix it. I was distraught. This is my favorite cup that I have here, but I did get it fixed. Use that ceramic glue. Amazon's great. I don't know about you guys, but like, find anything on Amazon. You might argue that that's good or bad, but I use them frequently. Jessica says, most of my XRP is at iTrust IRA. Do you worry that could iTrust go away and there goes my XRP? Is there a benefit of moving IRA over to DAG? iTrust is a competitor. They have a good product. They've been around a long time. They have an established name. I would say the edge that we have is institutional custody. And they might argue that they have institutional custody through Fireblocks. They do have segregated vaults over there. They are audited. They're not a bad solution at all. And many people already have IRAs there. I'll give you the pros and cons. So there, it's going to be difficult for them to create an algorithmic trading product that generates additional returns on your XRP. I think if they were going to do that, they already would have, because we're to market with it. We already have it. But there's no cost to hold your assets there. We charge AUM fees, even on the IRA. So, but now we have a product where you can, deploy your XRP in and generate enough cash flow to be able to offset those costs and make additional money and generate additional XRP. And that's at Anchorage. And Anchorage is, again, my definition of an institutional custodian. They have all the licenses, they're bankruptcy remote, they're insured, they're segregated, and they use HSMs, which is FIPS compliant. Fireblocks uses MPC technology, which is good. But HSMs, provide additional security. There's some quantum resistance components to Anchorage. I don't think iTrust is going to go anywhere. But pros and cons. We would love to work with you if that's something you're interested in. You can talk with an advisor, look at the product that we have and how we generate the returns. They do trade the XRP inside the account. So if you just want to hold it over the long term, it's probably cheaper to keep it at iTrust. But if you want to generate additional returns in cash inside your IRA, we would love to help you do that. All right. I will say this: we've had a lot of people move assets over from iTrust to us, but they also have some other assets with us, and they want it all in one place. So, again, up to you. I tried to give you pros and cons, and hopefully, again, we would love to work with you if you would like to have that conversation. We just did this one on the IRA. Scrolling on up, we got about 15 minutes left here before we wrap it up tonight. OKMO says, "Hey Jake, can you speak a little bit about your proprietary trading and returns for investors in your fund?" So we have 2 sub-advisors that we work with that have built bespoke strategies for us that you can't get anywhere else. Same thing with the IRA product. That's a bespoke strategy you can't get anywhere else. These are unique to Digital Wealth Partners, and they're specific for XRP. We are the only people in the market doing this at scale compliantly with full supervision from the SEC and FINRA. And oversight from our fund admin and Witham, who's going to do the audit on the hedge fund. They're almost done with that. So anyway, we structure this again. I've talked about it before, but I'll go over it. Oh, okay. Dan sent me DXC here, so I'll get into that in a second. One of the strategies for the income fund, so I can only talk about 2 of the products publicly that we have there at Digital Wealth Partners. If you want to know more about the other products, you're going to have to go talk to an advisor, and they can give you more information. But the 2 products I can talk about are the income fund and the growth fund. One of those is with a sub-advisor that trades perpetual futures on Bitcoin, XRP, and does some other options trading in order to be able to generate and compound returns on your XRP. And then the algorithmic trading and arbitrage that Algos, one of our other partners, does is for the income fund, and they trade the top 50 digital assets, which we don't believe are securities. And so we're able to, again, we made money that day when the market fell on that fund. That fund did about 5% on the year. Up to this point, April will be 1 total year that we've had that out. So we'll have audited stuff that comes out from DWP for you guys, and I'm excited to get those out for people. But that's how we do it. Again, we collateralize the asset, we reflect it off exchange, we get a line of margin against it, and we trade that margin in market neutral strategies to be able to generate and compound, generate cash flow and compound your investment. And again, if you want want the tear sheets, you want further clarity on that, you should reach out to Digital Wealth Partners. You can go to the contact us form there, and one of our support team members or one of our advisors will reach out. We got Bailey. They say, "Oh, Bailey, hey Jake, XRP has been in the works for quite some time now, multiple decades. Yes. Why are you so sure it's going to play out in the very near future? Thanks for everything." Things are in place at this point. So, like as an example, in 2024, when the reverse carry trade started to unwind, the Clarity Act and the Genius Act hadn't even been proposed. I put out my prediction in March of 2024 about the domino theory, and one of the components was the Genius Act, the stablecoin bill being passed. It wasn't even called the Genius Act at the time. I called it the stablecoin bill. That wasn't in place when the reverse carry trade started to unwind in August of 2024. And they shored things up. They kicked the can. They were able to hold interest rates there in Japan until we were in position to be able to soak up those treasuries so that it wouldn't destabilize the bond market and put us in a Mad Max scenario. So you've got that. You've got all the acquisitions that Ripple made last year in order to be able to work at scale. You had the launch of ROUSD, which is the first stable coin on the XRPL. Which I think there will be more stablecoins issued on the XRPL in the not too distant future. Monica Long talked about that just the other day. So, and then I've attended Swell the last 3 years. I was in Dubai and then Miami and then in New York here recently. In the previous 2 years, they still were talking about, compliance regulation, custody, digital identity. And they were like, look, the bedrock has to be in place before we can actually implement this stuff. The bedrock is in place now. And here well, not here, but in 2025 at Swell in New York, State Street, BlackRock, Fidelity, many other large institutions gave timelines on when they thought this stuff would happen. And they felt like by the end of 2028, we would have full tokenization of markets. Like that was stated by multiple large financial institutions. And for that to happen, like we've got to get liquidity into these networks. We've got to get adoption, and we've got to get to work, tokenizing real world assets on chain. And we have to have settlement and payments first. That is the first thing that has to be in place after digital identity and custody are in place for these financial institutions. KYB, KYC, AML, OFAC, accreditation, all of those are credentials that you can have on the XRPL that are tied to your digital identity. And now that we have permission domains, you can use that as your key to be able to participate in certain ecosystems. Banks and institutions want to know the counterparties they're working with. They want to have visibility into that, and they want to be able to operate in private permissioned ecosystems alongside the public mainnet in order to be able to participate in a secondary market where they can access liquidity for these tokenized assets. So all that being said, with the timelines that were given, and again, one of the other interviews that happened at Swell was Monica Long and the president of NASDAQ. And she talked about, back-end settlement and reconciliation of the stock market was the first application for distributed ledger technology and blockchain. I know that that's been sitting in the background for years, developed Project Ion with DTCC and R3. So, that's been finalized in August of 2022. All these things are ready. All these things are in place. We're right here on the precipice of, regulation. We got bipartisan support for the most part on this asset class. There's still banks, that are fighting tooth and nail to keep hold of stuff, but we're right here on the precipice of the Cambrian explosion and the adoption of these assets. And the people that are positioned are going to do exceptionally well in this transition. David, my man, he says, what are your thoughts on this DXC technology? All right, so let me pull this up here. We've got DXC partners in Ripple to empower global banks with scalable digital asset custody. So the article was on PressWire or PR Wire, Newswire. They say January 21st, a large enterprise technology and innovative partner today announced a strategic partnership with Ripple, a financial technology company that offers crypto solutions for businesses to help banks seamlessly adopt digital assets, custody, and payment capabilities at enterprise scale. A regulated financial institution, navigating an era, leveraging DXC's Hogan core banking platform, which powers more than 300 million deposit accounts and over 5 trillion in deposits globally. The initiative integrates Ripple's digital asset technology and payment at a large scale. So very similar to like G Treasury type situation is what it seems like to me, which is great. What my wife is saying, what's wrong? Well, I had to read the deal. So I'm back on TikTok. Sorry. I had to read a text message on my phone. Dan was nice enough to send it to me. Shout out to Dan, by the way. Carbon 2, or Carbon 3 now, maybe. We actually have Carbon 3 now, and it's pretty exclusive. It's invite only. You have to be in Carbon 2 for a period of time in order to be able to apply for Carbon 3. They're going to do a lot of things with the mastermind where, I don't want to say I want to season people in. Like, I don't want to oversell people on something they don't need is really what it comes down to. Many people are like, at a point where they just got into this. Social's great for that. If you have your LLC and you're looking to do some private investment, Carbon 1's great for that. If you're a bit more advanced in your estate planning and you're looking for help with trusts and maybe to mitigate taxes and you've got some higher income, Carbon 2's great for that. And if you are in the very advanced estate planning and looking at PPLI and a lot of the other things that we offer on the more complex estate planning and wealth planning component of Digital Ascension Group, we do a lot of education about family office, Many people will become a single family office on the other side of this. You'll have hundreds of millions of dollars. If you want to work with us for the management of the crypto, you could probably employ people for the rest of the stuff that you want to do. We just want to add value where we can. And so again, when it comes to the mastermind, we don't want people upgrading to certain levels that may not get the full benefit from it, or they just hadn't put the time in, and like, I don't feel right taking people's money and giving them it. The value provided doesn't equate, to what they need. I'd rather people pay less and get what they need rather than pay more and get a bunch of stuff that they don't. All right. So anyway, would love to work with people over there in the mastermind. Again, you go to beyondbroke.com. I have about 18,000 members there in the mastermind. I think we're one of the largest crypto groups in the world at this point, which is wild to say. But again, that's because of you guys. If you guys didn't care about what we're doing, you weren't excited about it. It's month to month, no contract. People get the value. We always want to provide more value than you're paying. So if you want to check it out, we'd love to have you. You can use the code for a little while longer. Beyond Broke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO like Mary Oscar gets you the first month for a small discount there. And again, social membership ends after this month. For any new signups, social members will have lifetime, $25 if they want to stay there. But any new people will have to pay $100 or more to join Carbon 1 or higher. Wayne, what's up, Wayne? He says, if XRP rockets in a short period of time, will it cause liquidity issues at the exchanges? Yes. If so, how will DWP handle the situation if chaos ensues? And where does DWP sell clients crypto? We work with a brokerage, and we're able to get access to all the different liquidity providers across the ecosystem. We do the same thing with options and other stuff as well. We have the largest breadth of options to be able to access liquidity versus pretty much anybody else in the market because of our partnerships. So shouldn't be an issue. I don't think there'll be a problem buying or selling your XRP. I think it's going to be buying XRP that's going to be an issue on the other side of price appreciation. I think the exchanges are going to hoard it because they're going to need it to be able to settle transactions when Tether has problems. So no issue selling. Don't really worry about that. It's just going to be buying it once it's a high price that I think may be a little bit more difficult. Here's another one. We've got Soul Shift Reina. Hey, good to see you. They say, Carbon 1, we are chatting on videos recently about XRP and bank institutional custody still at risk for being confiscated. Thoughts? If in an LLC, is it safer? So anybody domestically here in the US, we require that they set up an LLC. We did just roll out the ability to onboard international people in their personal name as an individual. So if you're in Canada, the UK, or another jurisdiction where it's hard to set up a corporation, but you want to work with digital wealth partners, you can reach out and they can establish a individual account for international people. Domestically, it's still the LLC. Multi-sig is what I would say. So you have to sign for your assets to be removed. If you don't sign, your assets aren't removed. So there's your answer. I mean, it's not, the government can't just come in and take your stuff. And that's the other benefit of, like you still get a lot of the same control and options and benefits from self-custody. It's an FBO account for the benefit of in your name. You own the assets through whatever corporation or as an individual if you're international. They're at Anchorage. It is your own segregated wallet. So, I don't think there's a way that the government could come take your stuff, nor do I think they're going to want to. I think that that's just people fear-mongering. The US government, I think, has plenty of their own XRP. They don't need yours. When I went to Ripple and said, hey, can we lend you XRP and, participate in ODL? You know what their response was to me? We have 4.8 billion XRP. Why do we need yours? That might change. But at the time, a couple years ago, that was their answer. And I think the government feels the same way. They don't need are crypto. Retail owns a very small portion of XRP, and the majority of people are going to sell it. I think that there might be 50,000 people on the planet within the next year that have more than 10,000 XRP. I think the majority of people are just going to liquidate their positions as it goes up. If it's $100 or $1,000, people are out. They'll deal with the taxes. They'll pay it, especially if they've been holding it for a long time. They want liquidity. We don't want you to do that. I say that. You never go broke taking profits. And in a lot of situations, it is a good idea to take profits. I would just say, hey, me personally, I don't plan on doing that. I plan on borrowing against it. I plan on putting it into products like we already have today where it's earning money. Getting quarterly cash flow, getting monthly cash flow off of some of the products that we're coming to market with here in the near future. And, living off of that and letting the asset continue to appreciate over time to, $1,000, $10,000, $50,000, $100,000, $1 million is what I think XRP will go to over the next 10 years. So, why would I sell it? What else am I going to put the money into that's going to have more appreciation than that? And if I'm able to leverage it to generate cash flow or borrow against it tax-free, like that's the dream. That is what the wealthiest people in the world do. They don't sell assets. But anyway, all that being said, I do think most people will probably sell. There may be 50 to 100,000 people globally on the other side of $100 or $1,000 XRP that have more than 10,000 XRP. This person, because I'm going to butcher the name, says, "Hey Jake, hope you're well, bro. How you feel XRP price will be from now? We still waiting for oil to go up and many issues in the world now, but no change in price at all. And when you opening office in Thailand? Waiting. We're looking at maybe Korea, which wouldn't be too far from Thailand here in 2026. So Southeast Asia is a hot market for XRP, and we're looking to expand operations there. And then maybe over in Dubai also. Again, going to both tokens this year in Singapore and Dubai. So would love to work with you. And we can work with you now if you want to custody your assets here at Anchorage. Zodia is probably the partner we're looking at internationally. And it's just going to require oil, my man. I know people don't want to hear that. They want to hear there's some other catalysts. They want to hear, it's going to happen. When you see oil spike, it'll be your tell. Okay. Until then, we're just twiddling our thumbs, dollar cost averaging when you get a dip. At least that's my personal opinion. DFW Mike says, we read this one. Dan was nice enough to put that over. So again, appreciate the super chat and the outlay there. Excited to see that. Again, pretty big, like G Treasury, over 300 million deposits, $5 trillion globally that now could be moving on the XRPL. Running down to the clock here. We'll take two more super chats if I could find some, and we'll wrap it up for tonight. You guys did a good job and stop posting super chats after 10 o'clock like I told you to. So again, I don't like when people pay money and then they don't get their stuff answered. This person says, Bitcoin gets billions of inflows and volume scarcity. Why doesn't the price increase? If XRP sees the same inflows and volume and supply, means it will likely perform worse. So XRP doesn't get billions in inflow. I think we're just now close to $1 billion in inflows. So, if we saw billions of inflows, billions of dollars in inflows, you would definitely see price appreciation in a very short period of time. That is what will cause the price to gap up. And that is why I think when BlackRock rolls their ETF, we're going to see those billions in inflows in a very short period and the price at a much, much higher level. We already went over the Supreme Court ruling, and I think I'm through all the super chats tonight. I'm going to grab one over here on TikTok for you guys. I always neglect TikTok. When oil spikes, Japan will raise rates, which will cause the markets to crash because people have to pay their loans back. You got it. Oh, there was a guy over there on Twitter today who posts with the fake girlfriends all the time and does the Solana memes and Bitcoin, NFTs and stuff. I can't think of his name. He's funny. He's very erratic out there on his porch in Miami. But he was like, they're talking about Greenland, but that's not what's happening in the markets. It's Japan. People are starting to catch on, man. They're starting to figure it out. And we were been on the forefront of this the whole time. If you want to learn more and make sure that you're on the forefront of stuff, again, we would love to have you in the mastermind. That's beyondbroke.com. You can use the code beyondbroke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO, like Mary Oscar, get you the first month for a small discount. And again, we are wrapping up social membership for new people at the end of this month. So if you want to lock that in and make sure that you have the prices that exist today before price appreciation happens, on the other side of a $10 XRP, we are closing the doors. It will be a private community, invite only, and will be a much, much higher price for anybody to participate. Other than that, the webinars tomorrow, if we have an insurance webinar and we have the Living Trust webinar. So if you want to learn about either one of those things, we would love to see you in those. If you need an LLC and a trust, you can get that at digitalfamilyoffice.io and use the code 50 off 50 OFF DAG If you don't have at least $50,000 to $80,000 in crypto, probably just keep buying crypto. You don't need to set up an LLC yet. I do think you're going to have to be worth a lot of money when price appreciation happens, but you'll be able to do it after. People that are doing it at that rate, again, the gift tax threshold here in the US is 30 million. That's kind of why I picked that threshold, because I think that XRP will appreciate very rapidly. Other people are going to tell you don't need an LLC till it's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they would be right, usually. I don't think that they believe the price is going to aggressively appreciate as much as I do. So again, that's why I give that threshold. And we would love to work with you to set that up. You don't have to work with us. You can work with other attorneys. Go get quotes. Go talk to other people. But if you watch the video that I have, you'll be at least educated on the LLC and be able to ask them questions and make sure they're going to do it the right way. If you don't work with us. And then last but not least, if you have at least 50,000 XRP and you do have your assets in a corporation here in the US or a trust, we would love to work with you at Digital Wealth Partners to be able to generate returns on the XRP. You do have to be accredited in order to be able to get access to the funds that we have today. That should be changing in the very near future as we introduce these other products. We can do IRAs, like we talked about. If you want to migrate from somebody like Bitcoin IRA or iTrust, we would love to work with you. But again, just know we do have some fees that they don't, but we are able to generate additional returns for you through the algorithmic trading strategy that we have that is bespoke for us at Digital Wealth Partners. And then, yeah, I think that's it. The international people, if you are an individual and you're international and you don't want to have to figure out how to set up a company, we can work with you at Digital Wealth Partners if you have at least 50,000 XRP. So with that, I'm going to wrap it. Hopefully this was valuable for you guys. Again, appreciate you taking time out of your evening to come hang out with me and ask great questions. We'll see you guys on Saturday in the mastermind. I hope you have a wonderful night, a wonderful week, and we will see you on the next one.